You see, we human beings have an extraordinary tendency to make maps of things. We cannot simply be, we must chart, categorize, ascend, and arrange. The moment a mystic says there are stages of awakening, you can be certain the ego will appear with a backpack and a climbing rope, eager to begin the ascent. And so we construct marvelous hierarchies, 7 chakras, 7 heavens, 7 levels of consciousness, each one brighter, purer, rarer than the last. But have you noticed that whenever we draw a ladder to heaven, we have already fallen for the idea that heaven is somewhere else? The very notion of levels implies that we are not yet there, that reality itself must be reached by degrees. And that is precisely how the mind tricks itself into endless pilgrimage. It is like a cat chasing its own tail, perfectly sincere, endlessly entertained, and never arriving. We love these levels because they promise control. If only I meditate enough, breathe correctly, chant properly, perhaps I shall ascend to the next stage, where the angels serve tea, and the mind finally shuts up. But you see, this is the same old game, dressed in spiritual clothing. The merchant becomes a monk, yet still bargains for profit, only now the currency is enlightenment. The truth, however, is more mischievous. Consciousness does not progress the way a student passes through grades at school. It does not become something other than itself. It unfolds like a flower, not like a staircase. Each petal is already the whole blossom expressing itself in a slightly different gesture. The illusion of levels is simply the mind trying to measure what is immeasurable awareness, attempting to stand outside itself and take its own temperature. And that is quite impossible, isn't it? You cannot bite your own teeth or look directly into your own eyes. In the same way, you cannot truly step outside consciousness to determine how conscious you are. The very act of measurement fractures what is seamless. So long as you think of awakening as a climb, there will always be another rung, another guru, another mountain. And at the top of that mountain, you will find what? Another climber, another self looking for its own reflection in the clouds. But the moment you stop climbing, the instant you stop demanding progress, the landscape reveals itself. You discover that what you thought was the first step was already the summit. The road you walked upon was not leading to truth. It was truth taking the form of your footsteps. You see, the fascination with levels is not wicked. It is simply a misunderstanding born from love, the love of understanding, of naming, of mastering. We adore order because chaos frightens us. And so we construct tidy ladders in an infinite sky, pretending that what is boundless can be divided neatly into rungs. But consciousness is not an achievement. It is a happening. It cannot be managed, manipulated, or hoarded like coins. When we finally see this, we laugh because all along the ladder was drawn upon the air and we were floating in it the whole time. You see, the spiritual life can become the most refined form of greed. The ego, clever little rascal that it is, has a marvelous ability to disguise itself in holy robes. When it tires of chasing money, power, or praise, it turns its appetite toward enlightenment. Now, it says, I shall be free of myself by becoming more spiritual than everyone else. And so the ego begins a new career, a nobler one. But the old pattern remains. It still measures, compares, and competes. Only now the trophies are subtler, inner peace, transcendence, cosmic awareness. You can see it in the sparkle of the seeker's eyes, the slight anxiety that says, have I awakened yet? Have I earned it? It's a most delightful paradox. The self trying desperately to escape from itself, the snake eating its own tail, the eye struggling to see itself directly. The very striving for enlightenment creates the sense of someone who is unenlightened. The harder you chase it, the further it runs, until you realize the runner and the running are one and the same motion. People imagine that awakening is like climbing a mountain, and that when you reach the top, you'll finally be beyond all desire. But think about it, what sort of person would want to be beyond desire? Only one still caught in it. Wanting to stop wanting is just another want. It's like trying to silence an echo by shouting at it. You see, when the ego plays the game of spirituality, it becomes terribly serious. It polishes its halo, adjusts its posture, and tries to look like the Buddha in the mirror. But seriousness is not spirituality. In fact, it's the surest sign that the game has been mistaken for the goal. True awakening, if we may use that troublesome phrase, has no ambition in it. It's not something you win or achieve. It's more like a joke that finally lands. You laugh because you've seen through the trick. You realize there was never anyone to win, never anyone to lose, never any contest at all. When you understand this, spiritual ambition dissolves like salt in water. Meditation ceases to be a technique for progress and becomes simple play. Prayer turns into gratitude rather than pleading. Service becomes expression rather than duty. You begin to live as if there were no distinction between sacred and ordinary life, because, of course, there isn't. And that is why the sages smile, that strange smile which no one can quite interpret. They have stopped climbing. They are no longer trying to become something. They've given up the game of polishing mirrors and instead enjoy the reflections dancing in them. The joke of it all, you see, is that the one who was seeking enlightenment was enlightenment pretending to be lost. And when that play of hide and seek is finally seen for what it is, there's nothing left to find, and no one left to find it. There is only the laughter of the universe realizing it has been playing with itself all along. Now, let us look a little closer at this business of the self trying to awaken. It's really quite extraordinary, isn't it? A peculiar loop, the observer observing itself, the eye trying to see itself directly, the mind chasing its own shadow in circles. You see, most of our confusion about consciousness comes from this simple trick of reflection. We think there's me over here, looking at the world over there. We imagine two things, a subject and an object, as if the mirror and the reflection were separate realities. But the mirror and the image are one gesture. They are not two things, they are two sides of one event. When you stand before a mirror, you might say, "There I am." But are you in the glass? Of course not. The reflection has no substance, no thickness. Yet, without you, the mirror shows nothing. And without the mirror, you cannot see your face. It's a perfect dance, inseparable, interdependent. So it is with consciousness. There isn't a you inside peering out at a world outside. There is only the total happening of seeing, hearing, sensing, thinking, all arising together, like ripples on the same pond. The distinction between self and other is a useful fiction, a kind of mental shorthand. But it's not how things truly are. The mind, of course, doesn't like this. It wants to be something definite, something fixed. It wants to know, am I enlightened or unenlightened? Have I reached the 8th level or am I still fumbling at the 2nd? It longs for security and definition. But awareness itself is undefinable because it's not a thing. It's that in which all things appear and disappear. To see this directly, you must stop trying to stand outside yourself. You must stop asking the mirror to reflect the mirror. The moment you relax this endless self-measurement, the judging, the labeling, the internal commentary, something miraculous happens. You begin to see things as they are, not as you think they should be, not as you've been told they must be, just as they are, vivid, ordinary, and unspeakably alive. The flower doesn't need a philosophy to bloom. The bird doesn't need to meditate to sing. And you, too, don't need to become aware. You are awareness, pretending to be a person looking for itself. This is the grand mirror trick. You've been trying to find yourself as if you were lost. But all along, it was you who were doing the looking. Like a dream character trying to wake up the dreamer, not realizing the dreamer and the character are one and the same being. And when this is seen not as a theory, but as a direct, felt recognition, something shifts quietly within. The tension of seeking relaxes. The mirrors collapse into clarity. You realize there was never anyone outside trying to awaken someone inside. There is only the dance of seeing itself, endlessly reflecting, endlessly free. And so, once you have tired of climbing, once you have laughed at the mirror trick, something remarkable begins to happen, not an ascent, but a fall. Not the fall of a sinner cast down, but the fall of a leaf returning gracefully to the earth. This fall is what I call the 8th level, though the term itself is another delicious irony, because the 8th level is not higher or lower than anything. It's simply the recognition that there were never any levels to begin with. The ladder was an illusion painted upon the sky. You see, all the great spiritual traditions, when you get past the slogans, the rituals, the institutions, are whispering the same secret. There is nowhere to go. You are already there. The seeker and the sought are the same motion of being, like fire curling into flame. But we are terrified of this simplicity. We want it to be difficult, to require effort, purification, discipline, as if the divine were hiding behind a locked door and we must sweat our way to the key. Yet the door is open. In fact, there is no door at all. When you see through the ladder, when you let yourself fall, you land not in some transcendent paradise, but in this very moment, in the hum of the air conditioner, the rhythm of your own breathing, the tiny pulse in your wrist. This is the hidden level, the one you overlooked because it was too obvious to notice. The mind resists this because it is addicted to improvement. It says, surely there must be more. Surely enlightenment cannot be this. A chair, a breath, a heartbeat, a bird outside the window. But that's exactly it. The ordinary is not beneath the sacred. It is its expression. Imagine you've been searching for water your whole life, carrying buckets and building wells, and suddenly you realize you are floating in the ocean. That's what the fall feels like. The seeker dissolves, and what remains is the seeing itself. This is why in Zen they say, before enlightenment chop wood carry water, after enlightenment chop wood carry water. The actions don't change, the perception does. You no longer act to achieve. You act because action is the song of existence. And that's why I call it a fall, not a rise. The fall is a surrender to gravity, the gravity of being. You no longer fight to hold yourself apart from life. You allow yourself to be drawn back into it. When you fall in this way, you discover that the ground you land upon is not hard or cold. It is soft, alive, breathing with you. You realize that what you were calling the world and what you were calling yourself were never two things colliding, but one great dance, the universe waving at itself through a million eyes. The 8th level, then, is not a summit to be reached, but a homecoming. It's the end of climbing, the end of pretending you are separate from the mountain you thought you were ascending. And when you finally rest in that knowing, when you see that there is nothing to seek, nowhere to go, no one to become, then, for the first time, you are free to play. When you have ceased to climb, a peculiar clarity dawns. It is not a flash or a revelation from the heavens. Rather, it's the simple, unadorned seeing that was always here, like cleaning a window, only to realize the light was never dim, the glass was simply smudged with effort. To see without climbing means to look without the itch to improve, to interpret, to grasp. It means meeting the moment without turning it into a project. The awakened eye does not say, this is good, this is bad. It simply beholds. Imagine a mirror. A mirror doesn't prefer one face over another. It doesn't cling to the beautiful and reject the ugly. It reflects all equally, effortlessly, without judgment. And that, you see, is what awareness is doing all the time. It's mirroring the entire universe, joy and sorrow, birth and decay, success and failure, without preference. Ordinary consciousness, however, behaves like a nervous tourist with a camera. It's always labeling, sorting, deciding which moments to keep and which to discard. This one is meaningful, that one is trivial. And so we miss the living scene entirely, lost in our commentary about it. But when the climbing stops, when the chatter quiets, perception becomes pure, not because it's spiritual, but because it's honest. You begin to see people, not your opinions of them. You see a tree, not the word tree. You see life, not the story of life. And from this unfiltered seeing, compassion arises naturally, not as a moral effort, but as the spontaneous warmth of recognizing yourself in everything you behold. For the line between self and other grows faint, like mist dissolving in morning light. You see, to see without climbing is to see without climbing toward. You no longer strain to reach some higher viewpoint. You realize that the view from where you stand is infinite. Every grain of sand reflects the totality. Every breath is the whole universe inhaling and exhaling itself. And this, curiously, is the greatest freedom of all, the freedom not to struggle for freedom. The moment you abandon the race to the summit, the whole landscape opens, and you find you've been standing on sacred ground all along. The sages have always said that enlightenment is not a matter of adding anything to yourself, but of taking away what was never needed. The effort to become somebody special, somebody spiritual, somebody enlightened, that was the cloud covering the sun. When the climbing stops, the seeing begins. And that seeing is not yours or mine. It belongs to no one. It simply shines, as it always has. You know, once you begin to see without climbing, something beautiful happens. The game begins to lose its grip on you. Not because you reject it, but because you finally understand that it is a game. Life has always been a magnificent play, a cosmic hide and seek where the universe disguises itself as you. But for a long time, you thought the game was serious. You thought you were supposed to win. You thought there were rules carved into the very stones of reality, rules about what kind of person to be, what kind of life to have, what kind of God to please. And then, one day, you laugh. You laugh not because the game is foolish, but because it's so gloriously unnecessary. You laugh because you see that the striving, the proving, the defending, were all part of the performance, the costume, the infinite war to amuse itself. Freedom, then, is not rebellion. It's not saying, I quit the game. It's realizing you can play without being trapped. You can dance without pretending that the floor is lava. The free person still goes to work, still loves, still pays bills and catches colds, but they do it with a twinkle in their eye. They are no longer hypnotized by the script. They know the tragedy and comedy are both written by the same author, and that author is none other than life itself. When you understand this, you stop trying to be spiritual in the performative sense. You stop measuring how awake you are, because the measurer was the dream all along. You begin to take things lightly, not carelessly, but lightly, like a leaf floating on a current. And because you are no longer bound by fear or ambition, compassion flows more easily. You can listen without needing to fix. You can love without needing to possess. You can help without needing to be thanked. You can simply be, and that, paradoxically, is the most profound doing of all. The freedom I speak of is not escape from the world. It is intimacy with it. You are no longer clinging to the walls of the pool you've learned to float. You've discovered that life carries you effortlessly when you stop thrashing about. And this is why the awakened person appears so unpredictable. Not because they are chaotic, but because they are free. Their responses arise freshly from the moment, not from habit or doctrine. They play their part perfectly, yet without being fooled by the role. So, freedom from the game does not mean sitting out the dance. It means dancing without anxiety about the steps. It means knowing that even if you stumble, the music never stops. You laugh, you get up, and you keep on spinning, because now you know the dancer and the dance were never two. When one begins to live freely, another discovery emerges, a discovery so simple that the mind almost refuses it. You realize that you do not know what is going on. And that, my friends, is not a problem. It's the beginning of wisdom. All our lives, we have been taught to believe that security lies in knowledge. If only we could figure everything out, the meaning of life, the purpose of death, the mechanics of God, then we could finally rest. We cling to our beliefs the way a drowning man clings to a floating log, terrified of letting go into the vastness of the sea. But you see, the universe doesn't operate on that kind of certainty. It dances, it moves, it breathes in rhythms of paradox. The galaxies swirl without asking permission. The seasons change without consulting any calendar. The mystery does not need your explanation to exist. The trouble is, the mind wants everything nailed down. It wants conclusions. It wants to say, this is right, that is wrong. This is truth, that is illusion. But when you really look deeply, silently, you find that every answer breeds a new question. Every certainty hides another layer of doubt. And so, the awakened person makes friends with not knowing. They realize that uncertainty is not a defect in the system. It is the system. It is the pulse of creation itself. The clouds form and dissolve, and so do thoughts. Stars are born and die, and so do beliefs. The mystery is alive precisely because it refuses to be pinned down. To live in this unknowing is not confusion, it is intimacy. It is to be so close to life that there's no room left for concepts. You no longer stand apart, analyzing and defining. You participate. You breathe in rhythm with the great heartbeat that no theory can describe. This is why the sages of every age speak in paradoxes. They say, he who knows does not speak, he who speaks does not know. Or, to understand reality, you must cease to understand. It's not that they're being obscure, it's that language can never capture what's beyond opposites. So, you learn to rest in the question mark itself. You learn to live as a verb, not as a noun, flowing, unfolding, discovering, and suddenly, life feels fresh again, unpredictable, alive. You see that the mystery isn't something to solve, it's something to love. To be free, then, is not to have all the answers, but to no longer need them. To look at a sunset and not ask why it's beautiful. To hold a friend's hand and not define what friendship means. To look at death and not tremble for an explanation. When you live like this light-hearted, unafraid of mystery, everything becomes astonishing again. The simplest things shimmer. The sound of rain, the taste of tea, the beating of your own heart. You are surrounded by wonder because you have stopped insisting that it makes sense. And so the awakened person smiles and says, I don't know. But it is not the shrug of ignorance. It is the smile of the ocean, content to be deep. When one begins to live this way freely, lightly, resting in the mystery, the world around them often reacts with confusion. For you see, a clear mind is unsettling to those who depend on fog. Society, after all, runs on agreements, on shared dreams. We all pretend that money has meaning, that nations are real, that certain ideas are sacred and others forbidden. These agreements make life orderly, but they are still make-believe. And when someone begins to see through them, when they look at the emperor and quietly notice that he has no clothes, the others grow nervous. The truly free person becomes like a mirror held up to the collective illusion. They reveal, without trying to, that the rules we take as absolute are merely convenient stories. They do not shout or rebel. They simply see, and that seeing is enough to make the machinery tremble. You see, every institution, political, religious, economic, depends on people taking the story seriously. The moment people begin to laugh, the spell breaks. And laughter, my friends, is the most subversive sound in the universe. Think of what happens when you meet someone who can't be bribed by approval, who isn't frightened by disapproval, who isn't dazzled by power or reputation. Such a person is impossible to control. You can't buy them, threaten them, or seduce them, because their sense of self no longer depends on what you think. They've stepped outside the game, and this, of course, is dangerous. Not dangerous in the way of revolutionaries who wish to burn things down, but dangerous in the quiet way of one who no longer believes in the cage. Their mere presence whispers, "You could be free too." And that whisper unsettles the world built on obedience. That is why prophets and mystics have so often been misunderstood, exiled, or even killed, not because they hated society, but because they saw it too clearly. Their seeing revealed the flimsy scaffolding holding the grand theater together. And when the actors realize the play isn't real, the show can't go on as before. Yet the awakened one does not condemn the play. They love it. They see its beauty, its tragedy, its comedy. They can bow to the roles of king and beggar alike, knowing both are masks worn by the same infinite face. So they continue to live among us, smiling quietly, doing ordinary things. They pay their taxes, walk their dogs, laugh with their friends, but inside there is a secret freedom, a space that cannot be colonized by ideology or fear. And when you look into their eyes, if you dare, you may glimpse that freedom, and something within you begins to stir, to remember. You realize, perhaps with a shiver, that the walls of your own prison are made of smoke. That is the social shock of clarity. It doesn't destroy the world, it illuminates it. It shows you that the bars were never locked, that you could have walked out at any time. When the seeing settles, when the laughter has faded into quiet understanding, you find yourself back where you've always been, right here, in the middle of ordinary life. But now, the ordinary shines. Living as the 8th level does not mean retreating into caves or floating in cosmic bliss all day. It means brushing your teeth, answering emails, cooking dinner, but without the burden of someone doing it. Life lives itself through you, and you let it. You wake in the morning and feel the soft weight of the sheets, the sunlight spilling through the window. You stretch, you breathe, and you realize none of this needs to be improved. It is already enough. And so, you go about your day, but with a new flavor. There is a kind of graceful humor in everything. You spill your coffee, and instead of cursing, you laugh. You miss the bus, and rather than panic, you watch the street, how everything continues without complaint. You begin to see that even what you once called mistakes are simply the dance-changing rhythm. You no longer act to achieve something beyond the moment. You act because action itself is joy, not the nervous joy of success, but the still joy of participation. When you speak, it is the universe talking to itself. When you listen, it is the same universe, hearing. And what's most surprising is how natural it all feels. There's no halo, no thunderbolt of divine light. You don't become superhuman, you become simply human, fully, tenderly human. You discover that enlightenment was never about escaping life, but embracing it so completely that there is no one left to escape. From this ease, compassion arises like fragrance from a flower. You find yourself kind, not because you think you should be, but because cruelty now feels as absurd as arguing with your own reflection. When you see yourself in everyone, how could you wish them harm? Living as the 8th level is not grand. It's subtle, invisible to most. You might walk past such a person in the market and never notice them. They laugh, They pay for their groceries. They hum a tune, nothing dramatic. But around them, things feel lighter. People breathe easier. Even silence seems to smile. You see, they no longer take the play so seriously, but they love it all the same. They are not trying to change the world, yet their presence quietly changes everything. For when you stop pretending to be separate, the world itself becomes intimate. The wind touches your face as if it remembers you. The rain feels like forgiveness. Every moment becomes a greeting life, recognizing itself. And so, living as the eighth level is not a state you achieve. It's simply the end of resistance. It is life as it is unguarded, unworried, unbound. And now, we arrive where we began, before ladders, before mirrors, before the search ever started. We come back to the simplest of truths, that what you have been seeking was never apart from you. It was never hidden. It was simply overlooked, like your own face in the mirror, too close to notice. All your life, you thought you were climbing toward reality, struggling to reach the light, praying to be awakened. But the miracle is that you were never asleep. You were dreaming the dream of being a dreamer, lost in a story of separation, a beautiful, tragic, and utterly convincing story. You believed you were a wave trying to find the ocean. But how could the wave be apart from the sea? Every crest and trough, every shimmer and crash, was the ocean playing as you. The struggle to reach the source was the source itself, pretending to be lost. This is why all great teachings end in laughter or silence. For what words can capture the joy of realizing that the search is over, that there was nothing to find because nothing was ever missing? The one who sought enlightenment was a mirage shimmering in the desert of time, and the moment you reach for it, it vanishes, leaving only the coolness of being. And yet, the dream doesn't end. The world continues. The rain still falls. Lovers still meet and part. The sun still rises. Only now, you know it for what it is, a dance of light, a divine masquerade. You can play your role with sincerity, because you no longer mistake it for the whole of who you are. This, I think, is what it means to be awake. To live the dream fully, but not be fooled by it. To laugh and cry, to love and lose, to taste the full flavor of being human, all the while knowing that the dreamer and the dream are one. And so, the awakened person lives simply. They do not boast of visions or cling to dogmas. They walk lightly, love deeply, and leave few footprints. They see themselves in every face, every tree, every gust of wind. Their life becomes a quiet celebration of the obvious that this, just as it is, has always been enough. You see, once you truly look in the mirror and recognize yourself as the whole thing, not a fragment, not a visitor, but the entire cosmos, peering out through a pair of eyes, you cannot go back. The dream may continue, but now it shines from within. And when that realization settles, there is only a smile, the smile of one who is finally remembered, because the greatest secret is that there was never a secret at all. And so, here we are. We've talked of ladders and mirrors, of awakening and falling, of waves and oceans. We've wandered all the way to the end of the path only to discover it circles back to where we started. You see, the universe has a wonderful sense of humor. It hides itself in plain sight, plays hide and seek with itself, and then pretends to be terribly surprised when it's found. You, sitting there, listening, thinking about enlightenment, you were the hiding place all along. And I can almost hear the cosmic laughter, not the cruel laughter of mockery, but the tender laughter of recognition, the kind of laughter that bursts out when you've been searching frantically for your glasses and suddenly realize they were on your nose the whole time. This, you see, is why sages smile. They can't help it. The whole thing is too exquisite, too absurd, too magnificent to be taken seriously. And yet, and here's the paradox, they take it completely seriously in their love. They sweep the floor. They make tea. They listen when you speak. Because when you understand that all of this is play, you play with your whole heart. You laugh, but your laughter is not cynical. It's compassionate. So perhaps, when this talk ends, you'll forget it. Perhaps you'll go back to your daily life, the phone calls, the emails, the dishes, the traffic. But if, in some quiet moment, you find yourself pausing, maybe while the kettle hums or a breeze brushes your cheek, and you feel that soft sense of being part of everything, remember this: that is the 8th level, that simple, wordless recognition. Ah, it's all me, after all. And if later someone comes along and says, "My friend, there's a 9th level of consciousness they don't want you to know about," well, smile at them, bow gently, and say, "Yes, of course. And that one, too, is part of the game." Then have a good laugh, because the universe is laughing through you, and that, my friends, is the final awakening.